Bona tarda, benvinguts en aquesta conferència sobre la situació actual i les perspectives de la responsabilitat social corporativa. I el que faré a continuació és presentar a la ponent, a la professora Dana Landau. And we are very happy to welcome Professor Dana Landau from the University of Tel Aviv and the Academic College of Tel Aviv. She is specialized in corporate social responsibility, and she did the PhD in qualitative research related to the corporate social responsibility. And we are very happy that Dana is here. It's here next to me, and we are using the same computer in order to avoid turbulence. And the idea is to have a session where she will talk for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, more or less. And the idea is to have around 10, 15 minutes for discussion, for questions and comments. You can wait at the end if you like, but at the same time, you can put questions or comments during the talk. As we will not see you, if you want to talk, you can do that without raising hand. So anytime you want, you can talk. If not, at the end, there will be time for this. And from the Col·legi d'Economistes and also from the Catalan Association of Accounting and Management, we are very happy and we appreciate a lot that Dana Landau is with us. And we appreciate also that you are present here. This lecture will be videotaped. So this means that if later you want to see, or people that have not been able to attending want to see the lecture, they will have the opportunity. So now I will pass the floor to Dana. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now it's good, right? So thank you very much, Oriol, for the wonderful presentation. And I'm very happy and I'm honored to be here with you. Was supposed to be live, but then we switched to Zoom. So hopefully we'll be able to connect as I usually do in Zoom or in live lectures. Please feel free to stop me and in quotation marks, barge in and say, or make a comment or a question. You definitely don't need to wait until we finish the session. I think this is part of what we're going to do here. This is more of a discussion. This is not a lecture because, you know, I'm not coming to you as students, but we're kind of thinking together about this topic. And as economists and PhDs, I'm sure you have a lot of perspectives relating to globalization in general, not just from corporate responsibilities perspective. And if this thing touches you in other niches or other areas that I haven't related to, please feel free without raising your hand just to say something so that I can also benefit and learn from this discussion, because we came to share knowledge and this is how I relate to this session. This is more of a knowledge sharing session, and I'll be happy to learn from your experience and get any information or anything that I would benefit as well for my future research or my future teaching or whatever comes out from corporate responsibilities, indulging in corporate responsibility. So I'm very happy to be here, and this is the time to thank my wonderful host and hostesses, Professor Amat. And let's start. So nice to meet you all. I don't see you, but hopefully. Now I'm good. Okay. So I want to switch the slide. It's just here. Oh, it's here. I never use this. I never use the pad. Sorry, I'm used to the mouse. Okay, so you already know who I am. I'm sending you greetings from the land of milk and honey, with a little bit of less honey now, but still the land of milk and honey. So came all the way from Tel Aviv. I thought it would, you know, be interesting to say a word about myself, although Professor Amat has started the discussion. So you already know where I'm coming from, a little bit about my international experience. I spent a few years in the US, at Baruch College, at the Zicklin School of Business, and then at NYU, at Stern, a few summers. And since then, I'm teaching executive programs. Now it's also possible to do it on Zoom as we do it, but I try to do some live sessions as well of executive programs, mainly in Europe. In the last year, I've taught a few sessions about CSR, similar to this one. I've been to Madrid, I've been to Dubai, I've been to a few other locations, Athens, and things are planned ahead for quite a while. So I'm very happy that the visit to Barcelona has been made possible, and I had a wonderful experience with the students here at the university as well. So a little bit about myself. I came here to talk about the rise of corporate responsibility in a globalized era. I put the word Z-Gen in brackets. We don't have that much time, so I have decided to focus more on globalization. The Z generation insinuates to the second half or the first half of my lecture. It depends how I'm starting, because these two issues pretty much go hand in hand. What I generally call the generation swap, in addition to the globalized era, both trends from both ways, but not opposite, pushed the issue of corporate responsibility one step further. And although I'm not going to discuss Generation Z here, maybe unless you ask something or you draw my attention to a specific issue relating to it, but it was important for me to put it in brackets in the title because these two somehow go together. I'm going to focus more on the issue of globalization, which is probably highly familiar to you. And of course, I can post the slides later on. But some of the main issues that I've prepared. So what we can see today is a significant change when we discuss corporate responsibility. It has started quite a while ago, but there has been a change in the status, I would say, the significance of corporate responsibility in the last decade or so. People usually, or decision makers in organizations, are starting to relate to these issues on the global policy when making decisions, and that's a significant change in comparison to the past. I mean, responsibility was something very vague at the beginning. It wasn't even on the table. When it started to be something very active and very relevant, it was, I would say, there were clear borders where it's taking us and where is it leading. And in recent years or more decades, I would say North America and Europe as well, things are starting to change. And as I wrote there, what we see today is that corporate responsibility has achieved more of a normative status starting in the 90s. More and more companies are joining the trend, which is for, I would say, public companies now a must, to report on their activities and how their activities are affecting the environment, the economy, and society. And you probably know that nowadays it's linked to the financial report. And when it's a numbers game, it's always important. Some people say it's more important than a words game. So there is a conflict between, I know that talking to some corporate responsibility managers, they still haven't made up their minds whether it's a good thing that corporate responsibility reports are linked or in the same report as the financial report, or they should be separated again. So I'm sure in your head, you can all see the pros and the cons. It's good that it's linked together because it sends a message of importance. I don't want to say on the other hand, but the same breath, sometimes data and numbers overshadow the significance of some of these words and trends. But nowadays, that's reality. You see it in the US, I'm sure in Europe as well, that these two reports are kind of linked. And you see the reporting on the financial reports closely aligned with environmental ones and the social ones. So this is a change that has happened in the last decades. I added this comment because to say that corporate responsibility achieved global status, and that's what we're discussing today, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's universally adopted or practiced the same way around the world. And I'm talking about the advanced, if we call it like this, the advanced world, Europe and the US. It's not exactly the same. And we see some kind of variation between companies, even companies in the same sector, even companies that operate under the same nationality or the same home or the same country or the same culture, some amount of differences. Sometimes it's for the bad, sometimes for the good, I'm sorry, and sometimes it's a little bit harder to create, a united policy. We can discuss, trying to understand the roots. Where is this thing coming from? The global stance, the global positioning of corporate responsibility. But it's a long process. I'm sure there are economic factors, social factors, historical factors, political factors. It's all linked together. There has been important shifts in thinking, in particular neoliberal ideas. I'm sure it doesn't surprise you, on nations and responsibility of nations and businesses in nation, and who's responsible for delivering public goods, and what is the stack of the responsibility in terms of business issues. The business is responsible for what, how much. And we move in the last years more towards an era in which there's greater responsibility and greater role for the business sector. There are advantages, of course, for the business, and there are challenges. I don't want to use positive, negative words because I don't think that's the right concepts to be used, but there are challenges. With great responsibility comes greater challenges. We all know that in personal life and also in more professional issues. So what we can agree, I'm using wider concepts that, without getting too much into details, because of course this is a topic that can be, can fill like half of a academic course. So I'm just looking, it's like from above, more of a generic view. Today's corporate responsibility is based on the belief that businesses have more duty or more responsibility towards society. It's not just providing jobs. It's not just producing a product. It's not just giving a service. It goes way beyond the product or the service itself. In fact, as some of the students once told me, you can't even sell something anymore because it's always the product and something next to it, something beyond the product. How did you produce it? How did you market it? Who produced it? Under which conditions? Okay, which price are you tagging? Are you using? So there are a lot of new questions that these questions haven't been asked before. And again, I'm using the Z generation with the Zers. With the Z generation taking the front stage, these questions are repeatedly asked again and again. So we're asking business leaders or corporate responsibility leaders today, sustainability leaders, are asking business leaders to reconsider sometimes their decisions and confront business dilemmas that maybe haven't been defined as dilemmas at all in the 70s or the 80s. Now they're considered business dilemmas, understand their environmental and social impact and how they can reduce the negative impact and, of course, increase positive impact on society and the environment. Sometimes they go together, sometimes it's only society, sometimes it's only the environment, etc. And of course, take ownership on these positive or negative effects and understand that they have been created by your activity. We're talking about the corporation's activity, and that it has influenced customers, suppliers, employees, shareholders, what we call significant stakeholders in economic or social sciences language, communities in general, and environments. I have chosen some topics for discussions. We stop where we stop. Of course, I'm close to the clock, so I know exactly how much time we have, but I'll be happy to send the presentation if and when we stop, if we don't finish everything. So I want to provide a general definition because I find it hard to discuss corporate responsibility without saying something very important about what it is and what it should signify. I want to say a word or two about why corporate responsibility. When I started to teach corporate responsibility, I actually started to teach business ethics, and slowly but surely I moved to teach corporate responsibility. And this is why I love this topic, because it's very dynamic and there has been a significant change in trends discussing this issue. So this is part of the agenda now when I teach it at universities in Israel and around the world. So a few words about why corporate responsibility, and then why now more than ever. And the answer, of course, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. The answer is globalization, which is the main topic of this discussion. Okay. So for a general definition, I want to say a few words about strategy. In the beginning, when ethics at the beginning and then corporate responsibility started to dive in or to enter the arena of business activities, business decision makers and CEOs didn't necessarily treat this issue as something that sits on the strategic branch of the firm. But what we see in recent years is that corporate responsibility goes hand in hand, is strongly aligned in organizations and corporations that do it as it should be done, not as an accessory, not as something, an additional, a nice addition, but it sits on the strategic brand. It needs to be part of the business policy and the decision-making process, because if there is a dilemma, if there is a business dilemma and economic considerations are closely aligned to environmental issues or social issues of the community in which the corporation is embedded in, and the issue of responsibility doesn't even come up, it means that corporate responsibility is either greenwash or an accessory that, the business puts on himself in order to make sure that it's there. So real corporate responsibility should be embedded within the strategic decision-making process. And we see it going hand in hand, closely aligned with profits and remaining economically viable. As I always say, you can't convince even one single CEO to be involved in corporate responsibility, strategic planning, if you can't say that this thing is closely aligned to profit making and making money, if I say it bluntly, because we're talking about money-making organizations. And this is, of course, it's not that it's part of the story, this is the whole story. And luckily enough, corporate responsibility is closely connected to profits and to remaining economically viable. There are so many empirical studies in the literature, in the practitioners' literature, in the academic literature, that connect between being responsible and being economically viable. So that's what we want. We want to leave a positive footprint, okay, as businesses, where we operate and how we do things, and also continue to make money and actually merge the two together. And the good news are that it's possible. Why corporate responsibility? Okay, so here I'm going to go quickly so that we have enough time to say a few words about globalization. So as you can see on the slide, these are all, you can quantify these issues to numbers, loyalty, engagement, employee, company's image, employee satisfaction. These can all be quantified into numbers. And of course, as we said, since it's we're talking about financial revenues, these benefits, since they can be quantified, it's worthwhile for the company to maintain them and use corporate responsibility as something that can enhance or improve economic performance. So you can see all these, and you can see them later on the slides that I'll provide: positive media attention, identification of new business opportunities. I'm coming from Israel. Israel is considered a high-tech nation, startup nation. So many of the startups, the technological startups, they do good by do well, or they do well by do good. So you can do something that is good for the environment and good for the economy, and it can also, be rich out of the invention. So these two go together. And I say again, luckily, because if it hasn't been that way, we would probably be in trouble, because if somebody needs to choose between doing good to the environment and being economically viable, if you're a CEO of in a company, in a business company, of course, that's an unbearable choice. And we all know, what's going to come out of it. So we're not in this position. And now that brings me to the main focal question of why now. So there are a lot of explanations, or I don't know if a lot, but definitely more than two. I chose to focus on one, which is the globalization that has increased significantly, of course, in the last 3 decades, maybe a little bit, even a little bit more. And with increased globalization, responsibility has changed its outfit. And I want to say, with your permission, a few words about it. So this is why I named it a new era in the age of corporate responsibility, because indeed, when globalization has opened its gate, I think corporate responsibility has become much more known. As I said, there are prices, there are challenges, but there are also, of course, good sides to this phenomena. This is an interesting question, whether globalization and CSR or corporate responsibility are friends or foes. I didn't want to use the word enemy, which is maybe a synonym, because, that's a little bit of a strong word. But what's the nature of the relationship? And if you dwell on the literature a little bit more, then you see different opinions or different perspectives, which is good, because globalization has enhanced corporate responsibility's appearance in the economic world, but, has raised also several challenges. And these challenges are not that easy to solve in that sense. So I've prepared a few slides that discuss this issue. Maybe later on, when you look at the slides, your ideas will probably, or your area of expertise will probably be there. A few words about globalization's effect on corporate responsibility. So first of all, as you all know, globalization is a mega level phenomena. When we talk about mega level phenomena, it's like a ball, it's not a linear line. There are always different kinds of perceptions and influences. It's never a good thing and a bad thing. So globalization is multidimensional. It's a mega size phenomena. Everything that is mega size, has different effects. If you're talking about Google and Facebook and Twitter, good things, and I don't want to use the word bad, but not so good things / even bad things. So mega level phenomena always have different perspectives. And we, as we say sometimes when we conduct SWOT analysis and strategic planning, it can be both an opportunity and a threat to corporate responsibility. It depends from which perspective or how you look at it, which company, what is the main context as well. So on one hand, globalization provides companies with a larger platform to promote and implement corporate responsibility initiatives. The door has opened to new initiatives, and entrepreneurs, can think much farther and in a wider way than they could have thought before the globalization became something so big in our era. You can reach a wider audience, you can make a greater impact. Impact is a word that is widely used in the academic world. Let's make an impact. How can we make an impact? And also in the business world, we would like to make an impact. That's like a word in itself. This word has a life of itself. And this has started in the world of globalization. So globalization has increased the size of the global market. You can sell more. You can, ship your goods wherever you want. If somebody has an iPhone, that's enough. You don't even need a computer anymore. Change the world. You can produce for cheaper prices. Of course, that has a good side and a bad side as well. But the world has opened almost no borders. On the other hand, or if you don't want to use the word on the other hand, you can say on the same breath, if you want to stay on the same path, globalization has increased pressure in the environment, more pollution, harder to, maneuver in this new world with regards to environmental damages, harder to control it, more use of environment and resources, labor relation issues, work conditions. Let's talk about sweatshops, Bangladesh, other areas, where Western countries sometimes pull the curtain. You don't see, you don't know, you don't feel, but we all know it's there. Human rights also, issues of community development. What you can do in Europe, you can do maybe somewhere else. It's all around the world like this. So there are also cultural differences, and these cultural differences have also added to the complexity, the expectation, and the behavior that changes. As I said in the beginning, when we use the same term all over the world, but it doesn't mean that corporate responsibility in Italy looks exactly the same like corporate responsibility in Israel or in the US or in Spain. Culture has a lot of, that's another interesting area for discussion. Culture is a very significant issue here. It doesn't look the same all over the world, but we're not gonna go into it. Friends or foes, whatever you choose, wherever you are in this spectrum, the same outcome, because business have gained a tremendous power. Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook at that time. Now it's Meta. It was a social network for finding friends from high school, from your past, something very innocent and very naive that doesn't demand an attention. But we all know that Facebook and Twitter and all these go way beyond finding friends from your past. Maybe you can also find friends, but that's not the main issue anymore. So businesses have gained tremendous power. And as we all say to our kids, with more power, more responsibility, right? The stronger you get, you have more responsibility. And this is something businesses act, I would say, in that manner as naive kids. Like, yes, I would like to be more powerful, but I'm not sure I want to take more responsibility. Let's stay with the way I was. But this is not an option. And this is something that businesses needed to understand, not always the easy way, I have to say, okay? That with greater power, you have to start exercising greater modes of responsibility. I chose football because this is the season of the Champions League, the Premier League. So that was the first association that came into my mind. It's exactly like in sports, right? Business companies are now key players in the Champion Leagues. This is not just the local grocery store or supermarket. Walmart is not just the little supermarket where you buy your grocery or stuff for home. This is a gigantic business entity. So if you play in the Champion League, if you have a ticket to the Premier League, then you can't just, say that my level of responsibility is a first grade level. No, you can't. If you want a ticket to the Premier League, that should be consistent with your position in the Premier League. You can't hold the stick, as we say, in both ends. You have to make a decision. Where are you, the big guys league or the small guys league? So we talk a lot about globalization and corporate power. And what does it mean? Actually, there's a saying, corporate power narrative. People discuss what does it mean and where is it leading us and how corporations benefit from globalization. They get stronger and stronger. And in a second, I'll tell you that when they match with social media, then their power is about to explode, meaning that it intensifies, okay, the corporate power in such a way that it became almost uncontrollable to control these companies, even though we're thinking about laws and how to control these trends, but it's becoming very, very hard. But even before the era of social networks, corporate power is getting stronger and stronger since the 70s and on. In the 70s, this issue has been discussed already under the title of the rise of corporate nations. And there have been growing concerns that significant corporate power would eventually overturn democracy. Now you think about it and you think about Twitter and Facebook and all these social networks, we know that it's possible. In the 70s, nobody was dreaming, more of a nightmare, that it's possible, but this has been discussed in the 70s, that uncontrollable corporate power might yield dangerous results. In the age of globalization, in our era, corporations have become nations of the world. It's not corporate nations, it's nations of the world. And they act like nations of the world. And yes, we benefit sometimes as citizens, as customers, as stakeholders, but there are also dangerous sides, and globalization definitely opened the door to this kind of opportunity. As I say, globalization has given rise to a situation where the state has withdrawn from many areas where it traditionally had a monopoly. I see it in Israel, for example, that, rich business owners, mega business owners, they want to help. And they take the initiative to do things that in previous years, the state was responsible for them. And there comes the question, what is the price? They don't need money because they have enough money. What do they want in return? So corporations in our era provide goods they provide water, they provide transport, education, healthcare, they run prisons, okay? That was the government's usually duty, the state's duty. In Israel, for example, there are no private prisons, but in other places around the world, there are, okay? In Europe, in the United States, what does it mean? That there are private prisons run by companies in comparison to ones that belong to the state, run by the government. In these countries, corporations provide security, and they have become important actors in the political arena. Actually, today we're talking about corporate political responsibility. And that has started since globalization has entered our lives. So many issues, okay, have entered the stage since we became a global world. And actually, you know that corporations are also involved in wars today, and they can change, and they can add details, and they can warm the atmosphere, and they can play a very significant role, because when Elon Musk tweets something, then the whole world is reading it. And I guess you understand the same as I am. This is just, this is something naive here, Walmart, but still important to see. Look, the revenues of Walmart is worth more than the GDP of 27 of the world's economies. And I'm not talking about third world countries. BlackRock, which you probably know very well, manages trillions, $4.5 trillion of assets. That's more money than total reserves of any country in the world. Bill and Melinda Gates charity foundation, look how much money they spend annually on healthcare. That's the same amount as the World Health Organization spend. And these are economic or business organizations, or the outcomes of business organizations. And thing gets, I don't want to say even worse, because, you know, that's a judgmental word, so you decide, but they definitely get more complicated when we match globalization with the era of social media and AI, and this is where we are today. So with the time left, I want to say a few words about what happens when globalization matches with social media, with your permission. I will give you the source here because it's hard to see. That's an influence paper that I've read discussing the influence of social media on political movements and activism. We all know that these issues go way beyond buying products online or commodity. And we know that today social media matches with activism and political activity, and that enable these networks to gain a tremendous amount of power. And the issue of responsibility becomes even more significant than it used to be. Where do we want to put a stop? Would we want companies to be so involved in political decisions? And what does it mean? So I know the slide is a bit blurred, but I'll send you the link of the paper if you're interested. So in the age of globalization, the rise of social media, as I say, has been a game changer, definitely. I mean, it has reshuffled the cards, changed the rules of the game. You choose the script or the image that sounds more vivid to you. And as I said, there are good things, and there are challenging sides here, but there is definitely an impact, and it's a complicated, multifaceted topic. This is not something that you can, start a discussion, finish the discussion, and say, okay, I've put it all there. It's out there in the course or the lecture. They know everything. It's getting complicated every day, and within different countries, you see different aspects and how it develops, and you see the influence. But I just thought about some significant key insights that we can consider. And again, this is taken from the paper, and you have the link down there, so you'll see for yourself. Because of the time limits, maybe just name one or two issues that social media has facilitated: the spread of ideas, the spread of information. Yes, this is wonderful, but as it says, let's see if I can move myself a little bit so you can see this. Okay, I'll move myself here. Social media has also been criticized because of the spread of misinformation and propaganda. And where is the responsibility here? and this is only at the age of globalization. The world is open. I read the newspaper in Spain from Tel Aviv and vice versa. So this is, globalization has enabled this. And now the trend has a life of itself. The social media is an entity in our life. And how do we demand responsibility from this virtual entity that actually manages our lives? Fake information, misinformation. This is something new. You see the legislative system crawling, breathless after this because no answers, and reality kind of dictates the situation. And the judicial system in the US, in Europe, is just starting to wake up, saying we have to do something about it. AI, social networks, yes, there are rules, I know them. But if you see what Biden has signed in July and the European Commission, I don't want to say too little, too late, because everything that has been done is great, but the judicial system doesn't lead, okay? And it's normal because reality leads the events, but responsibility is still pretty far from there. So I put a few slides that shows you, or just like me, where the world is heading, the political power of Twitter. Twitter has become an indispensable political communication tool, influences moods, opinion, affecting the audience, political leaders, and show me one politician in the Western world that doesn't use Twitter. Of course, this isn't something that we all know and we all feel it in on everyday life. I think somebody has a question. When we put Donald Trump's face, there goes the question. So I'm reading, congratulations and presentation, Peter Becker, H-Man, right. That's a reference to an interesting paper. The accountants will save the world, arguing that companies should not only report how much they won, that's how they won it. That's true. That's also true, by the way, when you talk about people and on an individual level. How did you make so much money? So we know how much money you have in the bank, and your bank manager is really happy when he sees you and shakes your hand. But there comes the question, how did you do it, okay? What led on the way to wealth? So I definitely identify who could best report. This was okay, but I'm afraid that everything wouldn't be reduced to what is called green and social washing. First of all, I'm afraid too. So we have something in common already. But I think the world today is more sophisticated than that. The beginning was pretty harsh. And I think in the beginning, yes, you're right. It was much easier to press the greenwashing pedal and say, I did it. I'm donating money for the poor to cure the AIDS. I'm a philanthropist, which is something really, really nice, but it's not being responsible corporate-wise. I think it's a process, and I think it's harder today. You can always show me an example, somebody doing it and still, being economically viable or successful. We're not here to change the world, so we know it's possible. But if I look at the amount of business companies that can afford it and do greenwash or just, it's going to just lip service, I'm sure there are, But I think you're dealing with numbers, accountants, but if it's a numbers game, I think it's getting lesser and lesser. I think it's harder today. Maybe that's the main reason. If you want me to be a little bit cynical here. So maybe nothing has changed internally. I'm not sure we're good people, or the leaders are, better conscious-wise, or maybe they don't even care if you want me to be extremist. But I think it's harder today. And when it's harder, people think twice. And if they pay a price for being irresponsible, then maybe they think 3 times before they do. Okay. Tweets for my twit. You probably know the American song. Instead of sugar for my honey, there's no sugar, there's no honey, but there are a lot of tweets. And we know why they tweet, because these tweets, everybody's glued and they change the world. And nations invite Elon Musk to their countries to see what's going on, to report and see in his eyes. And you keep asking yourself, Elon Musk, I mean, he's not a political person. Why do we have to invite him in order to report? Because this man, in one way or another, handles, and manages and runs the world in a perspective. So social media is responsible for a lot of the things that are happening these days. By the way, this is not just a corporate responsibility issue. This is in economic business. This is social sciences can deal with it from different perspectives. This is a sociological issue, and it relates to many, many areas of expertise, what has happened to the world and how to control it and how to demand more responsibility. Okay, now let's see where I am. Excusez-moi, I'm just moving it a little bit upward. I see that your computer likes Donald Trump so much that he doesn't want to go in any other direction. So, see there, computer fell in love with Donald. Oh, okay. So let's see what we can do here. Okay. So I want to say one thing because I'm looking and I would like to finish like in 5 to 7 minutes. We all know, this is similar to what we say to our kids when they encounter something that they don't like. We're saying, listen, this is not going anywhere. It's not going to disappear. Okay. You have to learn how to cope with it. So we all know that globalization is not going anywhere. Neither do social networks. They're not going to go away. I'm getting up in the morning and I'm praying that TikTok will disappear. Maybe it's going to happen soon. I don't know. But, for now, it's here. So we're not dreaming about vanishing, that one day we're going to open our eyes and it's not going to be there. But what we do need to consider is how to provide counteraction to the rising power, as I wrote there. I'm moving you to the side, excuse me, not to say uncontrollable power of globalized corporations, because what we see today is uncontrollable power, okay? And we have to push, and I use the stronger words in bracket, even force these corporations to be responsible, okay? And it's getting harder and more elusive because it's hard to put your hand on the person that needs to be responsible when we're talking about social networks. So this is especially true when globalization created or intensified this irresponsible behavior. And here, okay, I would like to mention, okay, let's see. Oh, no. Okay, I skipped one of the slides because anyway, we don't have too much time. We found ourselves in a position that because social networks are so dominant in our life and we're preoccupied with asking them to be more responsible, we throw the ball back to them many times. We have a judicial system with the rules and everything, I know that, but we're saying to them, listen, you created so much garbage in the world, so much pollution, so why don't you take responsibility and you try to diminish it? You do something about the bad thing that you have done to society, okay? It's like, that's first steps in education, right? You did something wrong, you fix it. And there is some amount of justice in it. I mean, it's true. And it sounds almost natural to demand a certain degree of responsibility from those who created the problem. You worsen the social situation, fix it. You worsen the environmental situation, fix it. But there is a problem because, maybe that's the difference between academic initiatives or lectures and real life, because when you lecture about it, it sounds not only logical, but also very doable. Like, yes, that's the right thing to do, and organizations do it, by the way. But if you average the world's situation, you see that it hasn't brought a good enough solution, because it turns out that in practice, things are, much more complicated than on the slides. And this demand from the creators of these problems like Facebook and Google and Twitter and whatever you can think of, to take greater responsibility in order to minimize the negative effects, even if it's justified, it's sometimes hard to implement it. It's hard to, in itself, it doesn't always justify itself to throw the ball back to them. But it's a hot potato. Who wants to deal with it? So you created the problem, you fix it. And when you throw it back to them, you put them in a certain situation, where they want to continue and make money. So even if they solve the problem, they'll sometimes solve it in a way, they'll maneuver, they will juggle the balls in such a way that it will never hurt their profits, of course. And also, we don't know how serious it is. I will stop after this slide. I just let you know that I prepared something longer and I will send it to you. But I was thinking about at least two central issues. There are more that globalization has intensified and increased. One is climate change, okay, which accelerated, has been significantly accelerated by globalization. And we keep telling organizations, you created the climate change problem, so you solve it. And I understand the logic, and sometimes it's done pretty well. But I'm talking about the average situation. And I read a very interesting piece that says why you can't rely on corporations to solve the climate crisis, okay? So maybe it's justified philosophically, okay? But it's very hard to sometimes to, walk the talk and see what they do in reality. And the other issue is something that I find fascinating, and I love discussing it with my students. It's the issue of privacy and data collection. The global era has intensified it through the use of social networks. I'm talking about data collection. As I always say, every piece of information seems to be worth something to somebody about us, okay? Where did I buy? What did I buy? It's not interesting, but it interests somebody that can sell it and make money out of it. And that's a phenomena that entered our lives in the age of social networks. The global era has definitely enabled it and intensified it. And open the door to so many unsolvable questions that I think even if we sit here until the next decade start, we're not going to solve it. The social networks live, breathe, and feed globalization, or are fed by globalization, if that's what you want. So actually the rest of the presentation deals with these two issues, but you will have the slide and you can deal with it yourself. I suggest we close somebody else. I see now I have two comments. You've talked about impact. How can you measure? Okay, so I want to say something. Oh, and there's another one in percentage, how much social media influenced the choice of social and personal life and choices. I want to tell you something. First of all, I'm not an expert. I'm not going to wear clothes that are not my size. So I'm not an expert on social media in that sense that I can give you exact numbers of how much, etc. But I can tell you that there are differences between cultures, okay? And also between ages. And this is why the issue that I omitted from this discussion is the Zers, the Z generation. And if you ask me, the coming generation is significantly impacted by social media. And if you have kids, and if they have iPhones, because I know I'm always jealous when I hear those parents that say that their kids are disconnected. But if they're not disconnected and they live in the same world that I live and you live, then you know what it means. Try standing in front of your child and explaining something, and when the TikTok just said something opposite. So yes, it's a matter of age, but the Zers are different. They brought a lot of good things, and actually they changed also the status of corporate responsibility, pushed it upwards to the center of the stage. I call this class winds of change. Winds of change is something good, it's positive, but it has definitely influenced. I can't say numbers or exact percentages, but it's definitely there. Western culture for sure. I mean, I'm not talking about other countries where there is a censorship and you don't see and you don't know and they cover the numbers. I'm talking about democratic countries in which search is free and everything can be discussed and searched and everything is open, of course. In other countries, that's a different story. Impact. Okay, so what's new nowadays is the impact story and the measurement models, and there are models coming up. Of course, that was the next best thing, because if everybody's talking about making an impact, when you go to organizations, then the first thing that these people ask is, how do you measure? Because you want to see the gap between how I was and, what has changed. If you ask me, this is right now still a lacuna in this area. There are measurable models, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And actually, I added one slide at the end of the presentation that speaks about criticism. Why is corporate responsibility still criticized? And one of the reasons is what you have raised here in this specific point, that the measurement is still, it's not weak, I think, but it's not as strong as we wish. We would have expected after a few decades, the measurement, and talking to accountants and economists, we would have expected that the measurement will be stronger. And I think it will. If I'm thinking about a stream or where will it head in the next few years, I think this is it. Because everybody speaks about impact, let's make an impact. How do you measure the impact? Can you show me a model? Can you discuss a project? And it doesn't have to be a numbers game, by the way. It can be a qualitative research in which you describe a project before and after. What's the impact? It doesn't have to be, a numbers game always. It can be done in a qualitative way. I think we can close the slides and make us, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to make a mistake. Anyway, I'm not.
I think it's here. Maybe.
Yeah, I'll close it here.
Okay.
This one, this is closed.
Let me check.
It's in Spanish. I don't want to. This is it?
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think most of them.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Okay. I have also a question for you. Let's suppose that a company it's motivated about corporate social responsibility, but it's a company that till now has only focused on economy, not in social aspects or environmental. So imagine, for example, a small and medium firm. Which are the priorities you would recommend to a chief executive officer or the general manager to a company like that that till now has not introduced any special corporate social responsibility policy and that now they want to start?
Where to start?
Of course, this depends on the industry,
Yes.
the country, but in general, yeah.
That's a good question. Okay, so I'll start with a more strategic answer with your permission. First of all, I would map the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats of the company. I walk the talk. I didn't just say it for nothing, that I think that corporate responsibility needs to sit on the strategic brand of the company. And I think the problem for many companies was that they were hysterical when they understood that it matters. So they hung up on everything. Okay, so we need to do something. Let's do philanthropy. Let's do something to cure the AIDS. Let's do something for minorities. Let's do something for the elderly. Just for God's sake, let's do something about it. And I think, hysteria is usually not a good thing, not a good infrastructure to make up your mind or decide about business choices. So that's a smart question. But for me, it's kind of I love it because it sits on the beginning of the story instead of the end of the story, meaning map the surface, stand in front of the mirror and say, what are your good sides and what are your not so good sides? Where do you have to improve? If you're honest to yourself, you know how hard it is, even for people on the individual level. It's hard for people to do this exercise and say, what am I not so good at? What should I do in order to improve? Now, if you're hitting the point, then you'll be able to work on those issues that you're less good at. But if you're, excuse my language, bluffing yourself and saying things that, that's not your real problem. The real problem, my real problem is so and so. So you won't be able to do something to overcome the obstacle. So what I would say is that you have to go way back to strategy, map your strengths and weaknesses, your opportunities and your threats, and especially opportunities and threats are more externally. I'm not saying they're not important, but that's a second-hand. The first-hand analysis is your strengths and your weaknesses. Start with your weaknesses. Understand what are your problems. If it relates to environmental issues, go there. I mean, what we had in the past is it worked the other way around. Companies ran away from that area. If I pollute, I'll tell you an example in Israel, bus companies, okay? We all know they pollute before they moved to electric vehicles, etc. So what they did was they colored the buses in green and they did something nice for the birds, whatever, which is nice, but I mean, that received cynical attention. You're coloring, it's not even greenwash and it's green color because they didn't want to deal with it because it was hard for them to solve pollution problems, etc. But if you run away from the truth, you'll never be improved. That's how I see it. They're still with us? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if there are any other.
There were 3 questions that were related to during the.
All them have been answered?
Not answered, but related.
Okay. Is there any additional question? Okay, so I think
They can always approach me if there is anything that we couldn't do. I can leave my email and you are more than welcome. I'll be happy to know you personally. That's part of the disadvantages of the Zoom, that there is no face-to-face interaction and I can't really see you or talk to you. So I will be happy to answer any email, conduct Zoom. If there's an additional question, my email, of course, is with me. So please, I'll be happy to meet each and every one.
Okay, Dana, thank you very much for this brilliant speech. I think that the ideas you have proposed are very good to have a higher motivation in connection with corporate social responsibility and also some of the main impacts of corporate social responsibility in the present world, like social network, the young generations, and so on. And as Dana has mentioned, if any of you have any question or any comment
or
contributions, as Dana says, you can contact us in the Col·legi d'Economistes or ACCID and the Comissió Conjunta, ACCID Col·legi d'Economistes. So you can ask, you can contact us, and we can make you, we can put you in contact with Dana. And in a few days, we will include in the website of the Col·legi d'Economistes and ACCID, we will include the presentation and also the video of the session. And so again, thank you very much to all of you for your for attending this session, and thank you very much for Dana for coming to Barcelona and giving this lecture.
Thank you.
And we will keep contact. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And thank you very much for inviting me. I'm honored.
Molt bé, doncs moltes gràcies a tothom i que tingueu una bona sessió, una bona tarda. I com hem dit, si alguna persona volgués contactar amb la Dana Landau, doncs ens contacteu a nosaltres i ja us posem en contacte. Moltes gràcies i fins a la propera. Bona nit.